Okay, up next we have Greg Neitzel from, says Chinook, Washington, which I know is close to here, but he actually grew up in Astoria. He worked in all these processing plants that were around here, started commercial fishing out of this area on wooden boats, and he's lived and sold fish in Japan for 12 years and speaks fluent Japanese too, right? Konnichiwa. Okay, please welcome Greg Neitzel. Thank you.
Good evening, Astoria. Are we having a good time? Oh! I'm not up here to conduct a sing-along or tell you to quiet down. How many out there, how many really thirsty people do we have? Oh! Well, get your beers ready. This is a story for thirsty people. This is a story about chafing mats. Chafing mats, I started fishing in Astoria in the era of wooden boats and iron men. And on the wooden boats, we would use old fishing line and weave it into these mats. And on the wooden deck, where there was a high traffic area, a lot of wear and tear on the wooden deck, we would tack these down to prevent the chafing. Use it for a season, wear it out, throw it away, weave another one. When I make these chafing mats now, today, I have a lot of people ask me, how did you do it? Well, tomorrow morning at 11:30 at the Barbie Maritime Museum, I'm going to give a presentation and a demonstration of how I do these. And I'm going to have some of the raw material, the old crab line and the old ground line, and give you a kind of a how to do it, and then demonstrate. And I'll have a lot of these for sale down there. So, people ask me, how do I do it? So I'm going to show it tomorrow. But what they don't, normally ask me is what motivated me to do this, to learn this. So here's my story. It's titled Chafing Mats, or How to Relieve Desperate Thirst. In the fall of 1972, I was discharged from the Marine Corps and returned to my home area of Astoria, Oregon, wondering what I was going to do next. Growing up, I had butchered fish and crab, unloaded boats, and worked in salmon and tuna canneries. Now I wanted something more adventurous and challenging, such as fishing on the high seas. I signed aboard a 50-foot wooden fishing boat skippered by Captain Al, a seasoned local captain who knew the dangerous Columbia River Bar well. The boat was based out of the West End Mooring Basin in Astoria. We fished Dungeness crab that winter and trolled for salmon in the spring and trolled offshore for albacore tuna in the summer and fall. Before salmon season started in the spring, we pulled in our crab pots and surveyed each one to repair holes and check the condition of the crab lines. After surveying and storing the pots, we had a pile of condemned lines. Couldn't use anymore. I was expecting some time off, but Captain Al had another deckhand job for me. He took a coil of old line and showed me how to make chafing mats that we placed on the wooden deck in high traffic areas to reduce wear and tear on the deck, like coming out of the forecastle onto the deck. These chafing mats were wooden boat accessories, and many fishermen made them as part of their craft. We made a few mats of simple design and put them on the deck, and they were really cool. And I had enjoyed learning from Captain Al. A few months later, we were tied up in the West End mooring basin, and I was flat broke and desperately thirsty. Then I had an idea. I got some old line and made 3 mats and took them to the Portway Tavern and traded them for beer. Yes! Now I'm motivated. Ooh! I wanted to learn more about knotcraft. So I went to the Astoria Public Library and checked out the Ashley Book of Knots by Clifford W. Ashley. Yeah. This is the Bible of knotcraft, and was very complicated for me, but I enjoyed learning new knots and techniques and patterns. Desperate thirst can be motivating. The following spring, I signed aboard a 72-foot wooden halibut schooner based out of Alaska that fished halibut and blackcod in the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea, using miles of ground line, employing thousands of hooks. This was during the Olympic system of fishing, where there was a set quota of fish, and when the gun went off to open the season, all the boats raced out to catch as much of the quota as they possible before the quota was gone, and this season ended. It was a free-for-all fishery. Again, flat broke and desperately and waiting for the season to start, the boat rented a couple of motel rooms on Young's Bay in Astoria, and the crew started surveying last year's gear, getting it ready for the new season. We used 150 fathom ground line stuck with ganyons every 10 feet for halibut, and 100 fathom ground line stuck with ganyons every 42 inches when fishing for blackcod. We would coil these lines into skates and stage them on the boat ready for fishing. With ground line that had frayed or had nicks, we would cut out the bad spots and splice pieces together to make up skates. The ground line that had been very hard used, we would store out of the way on top of the wheelhouse and called them suicide skates, to be used in areas where retrieval could be problematic. Then the plan changed. We had to leave Astoria immediately. The captain had a woman problem. Maybe it was women problems. Not unusual in the fishing fleet. I'm not going to name the boat or the captain, but you all know the boat. You've probably been on the boat, as there are many such boats and captains. We had to finish up the gear work on the boat on the way to Sitka in rough seas, and it wasn't much fun. We would have preferred to remain in the motel. The season was a couple of weeks away, and we were flat broke and desperately thirsty. When we tied up in Sitka and our gear work was done, we wanted to celebrate in the local bars. We went to the wheelhouse to ask the captain for a draw on our expected wages. After all, we had put in a lot of sweat equity getting everything ready. No! Hell no! You don't get a draw until you catch fish, and don't come up into the wheelhouse again. You've been there, right? And then he left the boat to shack up with his local native beauty on the outskirts of Sitka. He had a girl in every port. We were left on the boat grumbling and cursing the captain when I had an idea. I went to the Sitka Library and checked out a copy of the Ashley Book of Knots. Ahoo! And brought it back to the boat and showed the crew what we could do to relieve our desperate thirst. They were all for it, but what could we use for mat material? Oh yeah, the suicide skates. We're in them now. It took us a while the first day to determine how much line to use and how the patterns worked, but we finally wove a half a dozen mats. We cleverly concealed our use of the suicide skates. Late that afternoon, we went to a bar and promptly traded them for beer and quenched our thirst mightily. Ahoo! Staggering back to the boat, we decided we shouldn't all show up at the same time in case the captain was aboard and wanted to know what the hell is going on. So, Gordy went first, and when he saw the coast was clear, he gave us the signal, and we all climbed aboard, satisfied with our day's work. The following morning, the captain showed up early and told us he would be in town to make some phone calls and not to expect him back for the rest of the day. Fine with us. The coast was clear. We were much more productive the second day and worked through a couple of skates and then went off to town to barter our mats and get drunk and boast about our skill as longliners. The third day, the captain showed up again and gave us some bullshit excuse why he was going to be gone the rest of the day. We could hardly wait for him to leave. As soon as he started up the dock, we got ready to go to work. Then calamity occurred. As the captain was walking up the dock to town, he ran into two ladies from the bar who were looking for our boat so they could get more mats and asked him where we were tied up. Oh, the captain blew up. He ran back to the boat and caught us with the suicide skates that we were about to cut up for mats. He screamed and shouted that these lines belonged to him and it would come out of our pay before any draw. And furthermore, we were leaving town immediately as punishment. We were his indentured servants. So we headed out of Sitka and anchored up behind Sanak Island for 3 days, baiting the hooks and waiting tensely for the season to open. Finally, the season opened, and we set our gear with not another boat in sight. We sat right on the fish. And after 6 days of frantic fishing, we had a deck load of 50,000 plus of halibut and headed back to town. We got paid, minus the cost of the suicide skates. We didn't need a draw. We didn't make any more mats, and we didn't see the captain while in town. It was a good season. But wait, there's more. There's more. Okay. It's been years since I last worked on a wooden fishing boat, and a lot of things have changed, but I still weave mats out of old fishing line. Since most boats are now made of metal or plastic, the concept of chafing mats is dying. Instead of bartering the mats for beer in bars, I sell them in the local Sunday market as karma mats. Each mat comes with a story tag that reads, "This mat is woven from repurposed ground line from the fishing vessel Miss Pacific. This line has caught hundreds of tons of halibut and black cod in the Gulf of Alaska, in the Bering Sea, in depths greater than 3,000 meters, 3,000 feet. This line is imbued with great fish karma. May this mat bring good karma to your surroundings. Oh! One thing hasn't changed. The money from the mat sales I repurpose into my new hobby, making home brew beer. Desperate thirst is still a motivating factor. Oh, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Yeah, excuse me. Let me get through here.